had talked about the Roots and how impactful it was when you first heard one of their more popular songs. And did you know that they were going to be something different? And did they remind you of anyone when you first heard them?
Um, when I walked across the park, um, and they started playing, I mean, initially I said to myself, I'd never heard anything like this. And then it started to skew in the jazz kind of space. It was, jazz chords and, chord progressions. It was a scattish kind of rhythm from uh, Black Thought and Malik. Um, did I lose you guys on that?
No,
Somebody keeps
we
calling.
hear you.
Your videos just out.
Um, and you had this live upright bass. You had this kid on the keys. You had a drummer. So it had a lot of jazz kind of vibey 70s fusion to it. Heavy Rhodes. Scott was playing on the Rhodes. So every chord was, a big swell of lush, vibration. Then you had the boom boom, with the upright with hub, and then you had these kids really, like wildfire on the mic. Like, Thought has always been incredible.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, depending on who you are and how much you know about hip hop, he's quietly, my top 10.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you can't argue it. He's in my top 20. He's not in my top 10, even though I found it. He's still not in my top 10, but he's in my top 10.
I would agree with that. Definitely.
And I argue he's top 10 showman in the history of hip hop. There's nobody that can go near the Roots when it comes to a show.
Well,
There,
did you were they similar at all? Because when I first heard the Roots, man, again, I had the same. I remember buying Things Fall Apart, popping it in, and saying, "Man, I never heard, nothing like this." The way that just the way the whole album was put together. Like you said, they had the jazz chords, which it's funny. It reminded me a little bit of Tribe, because Tribe had that low end theory. Was the first time I had heard anybody rapping over jazz was, just outright jazz was the low end theory. But so the Roots reminded me of that, but at the same time, they were completely different from.
Yeah, it was a live band.
Yeah,
it was a live band. That was the differentiation. The live band. Period.
It was like, so it's like and Dale and I were talking about this, almost like they took what had been done and even pushed it a step further, which is always what has happened in hip hop, with just a complete hip hop band, which, you just don't have that.
Well, you got to remember something. The Roots are rooted in the unbelievable history of Philadelphia when it comes to music. Gambling Hop, Patti LaBelle, Teddy Pendergrass,
Yeah.
And they used to work out of Sigma Sound, which was Gambling Hop Studio. So a lot of it was driven through their relationship with these phenomenal songwriters and producers. And the uniqueness of it was a love for two kids who went to school together, Amir and Tariq. And from there they became, Questlove and Black Thought.
Mm-hmm.
And they were friends at first and realized both of them had a passion for music, and they started a band. And that band was managed by my brother, rest in peace, Richard Nichols. And it just so happened that Richard Nichols, his best friend, had a son, and his son's name was Scott Storch.
Mm-hmm.
And so Scott's father was having a real difficult time with Scott. Scott grew up in Brooklyn, was born in Brooklyn and moved to Florida. And, you know, there was a struggle. So Scott's passion for music, you know, people don't really know this, but Scott dropped out of school in the 9th grade.
That's crazy.
And from there forward, he was driven to be a musician. His first record he ever made, he was 14.
Sick.
So, you know, he was young at it. But he joined Richard Niggas put the Roots together, and from there, you know, it went on. Scott used to be a house producer and player for Rough House. Remember Rough House?
Yeah.
Joe Nicolo, that was out of Philly too. So Scott was an in-house producer for them. So you talking about all that early Rough House, you know, music, which, you know, that's Crisscross and all of that.
Yeah.
He started there. And then he moved on to the Roots. And he's always been, you know, an eccentric human being. You know, even at the tender age of 17, my guy had a Jaguar. You know, my guy has always been a car enthusiast, has always been flavorful, you know, and has always exuded a swag that's incomparable. I always say that. But when you pair that against a mind of a Tariq, who's a thinker, and Amir, who's like, if you know anything about music, what you guys do, anytime, if you remember back in the day, Simpty.
Yeah.
And Simpty used to, that sound Simpty used to give it. So, you know, I grew up obviously around Marley Marl and a bunch of legendary engineers musically. So I got my chops, you know, iron sharpen iron with some of the best engineers to ever, you know, do this. And you know, I used to have incredible conversations because I was enthusiastic about learning. So I would ask all kind of questions. And I'll never forget my engineer, whom which I met through Marlon, who became my right-hand man, my ace engineer, but my dog. We recorded Amir one day. And from there on, the running joke was he sent you had never seen somebody, he's so locked in, he could lock in a Simpty without hearing Simpty. And what we did is he was playing the kit, and he doesn't stop. He plays the song 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So he doesn't do feelings, because back then we was on 2-inch tape. So, you know, you had to play. You had real chops. So you played all the way down. You can go back down and play all the way down again and throw some fills. And then you come back down and get happy pants down on the third run and really get stupid.
Sir.
You know, something that people weren't even ready for. So we'll never forget, he sat down and he started playing, and we were playing a Simpty in the recording area while he was in the booth, man. He never went off.
Locked in.
I had never seen anything like that. That was comparable to me watching Jay-Z write a rhyme without paper.
Exactly.
Even though I watched Biggie do it first. Biggie's the originator. And I watched Biggie write a rhyme without paper, and I watched Jay-Z write a rhyme without paper. So that's how comparable that unique talent was. He could play a drum straight to perfection with the optimal swing for 3 minutes and 50 seconds without missing. Not even a. I mean, you know how incredible that is?
It's
only the best
incredible.
of the best. Legendary, legendary drummers and just legendary players who could play guitar all the way down, who could play bass lines all the way down and don't miss a beat, you know, and could do fills and know how to do. You know, that's that man. When I saw that, I was blown away. And then to watch Scott, who also was just another one, and then, you know, Herb on the bass Herb was incredible too. Like this was truly a collective of geniuses. Like when the sun and the moon and the stars all hit at the same time,
right?
Galaxy blows up. That's what this was, and I did not realize that until later on in the game. Much later, because then I started to realize when we had other people who would come in and fill in. Like you had new keyboard players coming into the Roots, or new bass players, and throw a guitar player in. There was already a blueprint.
Right.
You just had to be an incredible instrumentalist.
Yeah.
You had to be
Follow the blueprint to a T, huh?
Follow that blueprint to a T. But the originators,
yeah,
nobody could touch the originators.
Yeah.
The first time I saw them play, man, they just played that shit. It was silky. It was and it was just you had to play next to somebody long enough to know how they're gonna play it for you to play it the way you play it.
So when you were saying Philadelphia music, because of course I was thinking about their first album, and it's funny, Erykah Badu popularized it, but the originator on that joint was actually Jill Scott, another hot artist from Philly. If you're not worried about way, that whole joint was. Badu was on the album, I think, but I think it's Badu's
No, it's the other way. No.
Jill's on the album.
Jill's on the album.
Yeah.
Jill's on the
Badu
album.
was on the single.
Okay, that's what it was.
Yeah. Because we needed. It came down to a couple issues, and
yeah,
at the time, and Jill. And so
but I mean, it kind of. I remember. I don't remember if Jill had an album out already. I don't think she did, but it kind of launched. It launched her too. It's just kind of, just you're saying in terms of them being involved in Philadelphia music, period. Not just like the hip hop, not just the hip hop scene, but also obviously R&B.
They are the founding fathers. See, if you were to put a tree together, they're the founding fathers of jazz hip hop. Except there was one, if you guys remember, there was a band in hip hop. Let me see how good you guys really know your hip hop. Where I lean on people. Name another band that was coming along at the same time the Roots were. Let me see if you guys know your hip hop.
Coming along the same time?
Same exact time. Quietly. A lot of people didn't know this, but I'm not gonna say a lot of people, but people knew. But you'd be surprised when I tell you.
Okay, because I was going to say there were bands prior to them that rocked with Curtis Blow because he was doing live instrumentation.
Right. No. Come back into the 90s.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
And I'll help you out. Remember the group, the Goats?
The Goats?
Ooh. Yeah, they were signed to Sony.
Okay, nah.
It was a band. They played hip hop too. The Roots had got hot, and it started to, people started to talk about this because, like I told you guys, we kind of went all over the place.
Right.
But they were, there was a lot going on in that era of uniqueness, like people trailblazing, trying new, innovative ways to make hip hop special, and we were lucky enough to break through. And stand out first. Now, the interesting thing is, like I told you, a lot of people wanted to do the deal, but David Geffen got it immediately because it was a band. If it weren't a band, he wouldn't have got it. But it was a band. It was a real band playing real music. And it wasn't some wild gangster, incredible gangster stuff. It was like you said, a Tribe Called Quest, just a live version.
Yeah.
Tight.
And the one thing that stands out, there was a record that we did to kind of share just the depth of and the richness of their talent. Tariq did a song, and he duplicated the voices of Chuck D, Slick Rick, Coogee Rap, Big Daddy Kane, I want to say 2 other people. And the whole record was him just changing voices. And when I say he sounded like them, he sounded just, and they changed the music in accordance to each one. So it's kind of like Cube jacking for beats. That's what we took it from.
Wow.
And he murdered it, man. I say murder. We used to just sit and listen to the song like, hell no. He sounds just like Chuck D. Dang, he sounds just like G-Rap.
Wow.
Eric, let me ask you, man, if when, because you were talking about, I was thinking, you were talking about the Roots, And when you come out and you are kind of labeled as this is your style of rap, like this is who you are, is it hard from a manager's standpoint to market somebody as no, they can rap this way. So my example is like, Black Thought. When you think of him, you think of Roots Grooves, you think of that, and then you say, yeah, but could he pull off rapping over a Dre beat, over a Timbaland beat? And you like, of course, but for some reason, like the fact that you even have to think about it, or like the reverse of that would be, could you put Snoop on the Roots with live music and him thrive? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like guys get kind of like, is it obviously it's been done, but I'm saying, is it hard from a manager standpoint to kind of switch gears and say, this is who you're gonna be if you've
Yeah, it
already
was hard.
established yourself?
No, it was hard. It was extremely hard. It took us a lot to break them. Nobody was a believer because it wasn't fit. Remember, that was at a time where Snoop was emerging. Death Row was emerging. We're in the on the coattails of Tribe Called Quest and that entire movement.
So we were kind of moving away from that conscious rap.
Yeah, native
style.
tones, conscious rap. You
Right. But
Gangsta.
remember, this is what I tell people all the time. Tribe wasn't conscious. I've had this conversation. Tribe wasn't conscious. If you go back and listen to their words, they were not conscious.
Right.
They just talked about regular. They just talked about, I'm the 5 foot, I'll get at you. You gotta remember, Tip talks street cool.
Mm-hmm.
They were all street cool. Remember, New York had this thing, man, this movement of the street cool, which nobody in the native tongues talked conscious rap. The only people that touched on conscious rap was the Brand Nubians.
Mm-hmm.
And they were spitting. They spit a lot of the mathematics.
5%.
Yeah, 5% mathematics. So they hit you with mathematics of the day. Earth times stars equal to the God and the body. That was them. But Tribe used to. If you really listen, it was just lyrical. It was just them and their day-to-day existence.
Yeah.
So the Roots, it was the same thing. It was a combination of just, Malik was a street dude, Tariq was a street dude, but this musical blend was the uniqueness of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the pitch. It was difficult, but, I think there was something about it. What always remained fresh and always delivered an impactful blow was the performance.
Yeah.
Nothing could ever beat it. So we could put them anywhere and let them do a show. And once Tariq and Malik got on the stage and Amir and the drums and the Scott, and people would walk away exhausted. Like, what in the what's that? Like, what did I just see for an hour? And where does a new group get an hour's worth of music?
Yeah, that to me is interesting what you just said, because I felt like when I heard their first album, it was as if they had 10 albums out already. Like
Right.
their presence was like from the jump. It was like, we here, we know about it. There was no, like, you felt like they were, and I told Dale this too, man. It was like they were Earth, Wind, and Fire, man. They were like, they had such a presence about them, And then when you saw them live, and it's not always, you don't always get this. I've seen a lot of hip hop acts live, man, and I have to say, everybody doesn't have a great live show, because to have a great live show is a whole different skill set. Everybody don't have
it. Is right, exactly.
Skill set. These guys have their live show is ridiculous, man. Like I said, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of live acts, just.
Listen, they used to kill people. We do shows with people and shut it down. Just shut the whole, because nobody had ever seen it before. And you got to remember, early on is when we were super creative. We used to have a member in the group. He was a bagpipe player. We had a horn section. You know, people forget that shit. We had a string section. It was nothing to bring in some
Yeah.
strings.
Tuba and
You
all
know, you
that.
got a
Right?
whole hip hop band with a damn tuba, yeah. You got somebody playing cello, like you're like, what is this?
But
So imagine if you from the hood, and you've been listening to LL Cool J, you know, back then we talking about Public Enemy and Heavy D and this one and that one. Then all of a sudden, and you just got the emergence of gangster rap. And so all of a sudden you go to a show and you see these kids come out. I want to, and what you gonna do? Flim flam, real hip hop and crazy,
That's
just creative, like Silent Treatment. I don't know if you guys remember Silent Treatment. One of my favorite Roots records of all time. Please tonight,
that's gonna be on. You know,
put up Silent Treatment.
Yeah.
The Silent Treatment, just like a straight classic road bass, subtle, cold, dry kick and snare
Man.
with Reek hammering it, just hammering it.
Hold up. I'm about to raise it up.
Some of the most beautiful chords I'd ever heard. At that time, I was blown away. The chords were just like, what is this?
What? Oh yeah. I got it up. The Roots Silent Treatment. Let me see if I'll try to do a snippet in a minute. That's dope.
So,
but go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that was the uniqueness. That's what we had to put the work in. And plus, you know, overseas, nobody touched overseas like the Roots first. Nobody. Wow. Everybody went crazy for us over there. Like that was just a go-to. And I'm talking about you going over to overseas with 20 people. Every trip.
Did you know at that? Okay, you already said that you knew Scott was talented. That he had already kind of made a name for himself locally. Would that be fair as far as who he was?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you know at that time though that he was going to, I mean, over the next 10 years, launch himself as a major player in the hip hop game?
No. I'm gonna just be as honest as I need to be. I went on my run with the Roots, and then I got heavy over at Def Jam. Because remember, I was at Def Jam when I had the Roots.
Right.
And I sunk into Def Jam. I was at Def Jam from 1991 to 99.
Yeah.
When was Def Jam its hottest? In the 90s.
I'll say 90s.
Yeah.
So I was submerged in the Mecca. I was blessed to be at the Mecca, and I was at the front of the line. I was special. Leor and Russell, you know, Chris Lighty and Russ. I mean, Chris Lighty and myself were the chosen two, and then a lot of people came to follow. I just went my own way. I always have gone my own way. I never felt like I didn't follow Chris. I should have, but I didn't. But I just got submerged in Def Jam, and then one day I get a phone call because I'm on fire right now, right? And I get a phone call. You know, some of the records. You got to remember, I also produced. I managed a lot of producers, so I owned a piece of Rush Producer Management.
Nice. Didn't know that.
So when you talk about Def Jam, the management arm was called Rush.
Right.
And I own Rush Producer Management. So I managed all the producers. So when it comes to having hit records, I've had hit records since I started. Put Your Hands Where My Eyes Could See. A Gangster Chick.
You were saying as far as, you know, Def Jam, you know, when you think during the 90s, Yeah, their catalog of artists, man, was their roster was, was ridiculous because it was like they were able to get in the '90s Method Man. They obviously had DMX, and then you add Jay-Z to that.
Yeah. We had Jay-Z first, then we got DMX, and then we got Meth.
Meth. I mean, to have
And
those
before we had them, we
uh,
had Warren G.
yeah,
Right.
We had the Boss, if you remember her, the rapper,
Mm-hmm.
the Boss.
Mm-hmm.
We had South Central Cartel.
Now let me
We
ask:
had
was that Def Jam West, or
no.
how
That
was
was just
that?
Def Jam. We didn't go
Okay.
west. We didn't go west until we went west. Once we got Warren,
Yeah.
but it was always, remember, Warren was signed to Chris Light and Violator.
Right. Okay.
yeah, Violator.
So we did that run, and then we opened up the West Coast,
Okay.
and then we just started to pile on. We went on a run. Everybody came to Def Jam.
Yeah, like I said, man, they were, I think one of the, I always say I feel like Def Jam was so responsible for where hip hop is today in a lot of ways. And then, like I said, they were so hot. They were kind of they kind of birthed commercial hip hop, I feel like. And then they were so hot in the '90s, man, with them artists.
It was certainly. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah,
Def Jam, Uptown Records,
yeah,
Pitchfork, not Pitchfork, but Wild Pitch.
mm-hmm.
These are the early hip hop labels that remember. Large Professor was on Wild Pitch.
Yeah,
Large Professor,
and that was a classic album.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was a nice little blend of bodies that created Jive Records. Try it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And everything else that came under that. But that was my that's where I got my music license and my doctorate was at Def Jam.